Today we're going to talk about the SEDI strategy of total physical response, or TPR. So what is total physical response? This is an approach to language teaching which pairs actions with words to convey meaning. It allows students to react to language without thinking too much, creates long-term retention, and reduces student anxiety and stress. In order to implement TPR effectively, it is necessary to plan regular sessions that progress in a logical order and to keep several principles in mind. Typically, you begin with action words such as stand up, sit down, and waving goodbye. After demonstrating its meaning with gestures and movements, the teacher uses it in a command form. For example, you say stand up and your students respond by standing up. So what is the idea behind TPR? It is based on the idea that the human brain has a biological program for acquiring any natural language on Earth, including sign language. The originator of TPR developed this approach as a way to help students learn language. The process is visible when we observe how infants internalize their first language. It looks at the way that children learn their native language. Communication between parents and their children combines both verbal and physical aspects. The child responds physically to the speech of their parents, while the responses of the child are in turn positively reinforced by the speech of the parent. For many months, the child absorbs the language without being able to speak. It is during this period that the internalization and code breaking occurs. After this stage, the child is able to reproduce the language spontaneously. Language teachers try to mimic this process in a class. The method also promises double efficiency in terms of rate learning, according to several studies in literature. So how do you teach using TPR? Prepare a script. It is essential to prepare a script for what you want to do, as it is extremely important not to change the language halfway through. It is also important to recombine previously learned language in new ways. These factors, combined with the pace necessary for successful TPR instruction, mean that it is extremely difficult to improvise the commands. You need to build on what has gone on before. TPR instruction should be seen as a progression, with new language being added to and combined with old language every session. Recycle language and review extensively. On a similar note, previously learned language should be reviewed and cycled into lessons constantly in order to reinforce it. Don't change the target language. While it can be useful to introduce synonyms, it is extremely important that the language not be changed halfway through a session. This is extremely confusing for students. You need to be good-natured and positive. In order for students to relax and feel comfortable during TPR practice, the teacher should project a friendly and positive manner. You need to introduce a limited number of new items and manipulate them extensively. It is very important to limit the number of new items in order to avoid student overload and to allow students to process and absorb the language. New and old language should be manipulated in a variety of ways in order to give students a large amount of practice. You also need to incorporate some humor. When students are used to TPR practice, introducing a limited amount of humor into class can greatly increase students' interest and enjoyment. You also need to make sure that the students don't feel forced to speak. Students should not be forced to repeat the commands or otherwise speak unless they are ready. And lastly, students don't help each other. Students should not need help with the TPR commands, as the meaning should be obvious from the context, the teacher's explanation, and previously learned language. Translating commands into Japanese reverts to left brain input, and the benefits of TPR are lost. Students' listening abilities are also not improved. TPR offers a fun, effective, low-pressure way to learn new words. This is a fun and useful SEDI strategy to use in the classroom. It is also one that you and your students will enjoy.